Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Welcome back to the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa, along with my co-host.
Hey everybody, it's Adam Schrader.
And we have an awesome guest today. He's with us. His name is Andrew Henderson. He's somebody who I've known for, I think 5 years now. Yeah, 5 years, Andrew. Known him for 5 years. He's a pretty good friend of mine. We've worked together. We've kept in touch. We've kept in contact. And I just have a really great and deep respect for Andrew Henderson. He's known as the Nomad Capitalist. That's his nickname. And he's called the Nomad Capitalist because he is constantly on the move. I don't even know if he has a permanent place of residence. If he does, well, he's visiting a different country every 4 or 5 days, maybe. Every time I talk to him, he's somewhere different. And his company, the Nomad Capitalist, website is nomadcapitalist.com. It helps people do what he does, which is work from anywhere in the world. His home is constantly on the move. So he does work from home, but he works from, I guess you can say, 50 plus countries every year.
Home is where the heart is.
Yep. And I have a really great respect for him because I've met a lot of people or I hear about people all the time who say, oh, if Donald Trump gets elected president, I'm going to move out of the United States. Or, if this happens and I'm going to move out. Well, Andrew actually moved out of the United States. He gave up his U.S. citizenship. And I don't even think he comes back to visit, maybe for like a conference here or there, but there's no reason for him to come back and visit. I believe, Andrew, you grew up in the Midwest, so you were born and raised U.S., but now you live overseas. So let's get into your story, Andrew. Welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thanks. Great to be here. Yeah, it's what's interesting is you see these people on social media and it is, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. It's like, actually, I already left like a long time ago. and then they don't know what to say. And it's like, well, why did you leave? You're terrible. How dare you leave?
Well, as soon as you left, it's like, well, then you have no right to be talking about us.
And you know what? Done and done. I'm doing my own thing. I don't, you guys do whatever you want. What I realized, and we'll get into the story, but what I realized after 2012, I watched the 2012 election in Turkey. I went over to Turkey on a trip. It happened to overlap. I woke up, and that was the last time in the United States that I said, like, I really care about the outcome. And also, it was the last time when I said, I'm going to vote for what I think is, like, the best thing for the country rather than what's necessarily best for me. I lost, and, it turned out that I just realized, the government's not going to solve your problems. And so I, going forward, said, you know what? I had one more election as a citizen. I didn't vote. I didn't really care what happened. But I would tell you this, now that I'm not, you go and elect a socialist, you go and have 90% tax rates, do whatever you want. Because here at Nomad Capitalist, we talk about how to have lower taxes, how to protect yourself with dual citizenship, that kind of stuff. And I think right now a lot of people are seeing the United States is not going to protect you. And really, no one country is going to protect you.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, where are you coming? I'm assuming you're locked down somewhere. Where are you right now?
So I'm in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I do have what I've been doing recently is I've been accumulating a couple different properties around the world, so that no longer do I stay in hotels or Airbnbs, but now I've got my own places that I fit out, and so it's been very comfortable actually. I see people who are doing the nomad thing and who are bouncing from hotel to hotel, and some of them are kicking them out. But I've put together a portfolio of places that I'm really happy about, and Kuala Lumpur I think is one of the world's great cities for living.
So where did you go first whenever you left the United States?
Well, for me, it was a journey, right? So as a kid, we did some traveling. When I became an adult, in my early 20s, I started traveling. I went to Norway first. That was like part of my heritage, and I learned some of the language, and I've since forgotten all of it except for one phrase. And so I slowly went to more places. Started in Europe and in China, and then it just became about going pretty much everywhere I could go and seeing, what was good and what wasn't good. For me, I've always looked for opportunities. And so, once I got past the initial, Europe phase, which I think is where a lot of people want to live, I got very deep into Asia. I later got relatively deep into Latin America and in some places in Africa. So for me, it just became a thing of I want to go to as many places as possible because it's just a matter of seeing, where are the opportunities? Where is their potential? I think a lot of people that I know, they'll go on a family vacation in the summer within their own country. And, if they're an American, maybe they'll go to Hawaii. And then they'll go to Hawaii and fantasize about living in Hawaii. I've always looked at that from the perspective of other places, right? So, started with Norway, all the way through Europe, and pretty much everywhere in Europe, pretty much everywhere in Asia. Africa, Latin America have been lesser, but I think everything has something to offer.
Yeah, Andrew, so let's backtrack and kind of answer or tell your story about who is Andrew Henderson, who is the nomad capitalist. I brought up, I believe you're from the Midwest, you're born and raised in the United States. Tell us your journey and what made you want to leave the U.S. for good and renounce your citizenship. Yeah.
So I was born in Ohio, and as much as I wouldn't identify as American for a number of reasons anymore, don't believe I'm entitled to, but I wouldn't. I would say Ohio, I think, is a good place, and I have some Ohio values, but I grew up there for 18 years. And my father, when I was about 12 years old, said to me, you don't owe your parents anything at the expense of your, living the life that you want to live. I got this very interesting permission slip that I think most people don't get, or they get the opposite of. They get the guilt trip. I got the permission slip. And he said, you don't have to stay in our city if that's what serves you and your career and your interests and your future marriage and all that. You don't have to stay in our same state. You don't even have to stay in the same country. He said you should go where you are treated best. And that was an interesting permission slip that I kind of put in my back pocket for a while. I became an adult. I started a business in Naresh's industry, in the radio industry, the broadcasting industry, did well with that. And suddenly all my years of libertarianism as a kid caught up with me when the big tax bill came, and it became real. And I said, well, this sucks, And what am I paying for? They're wasting all the money. At the same time, I was starting to travel, and I was noticing other countries would have higher interest rates, or I got along with the people better, or it's easier to meet girls over here. And I started noticing these different opportunities. And I said, well, why is that the case? And so I really started traveling more to study more. And it's been 13 years of kind of filling in those holes and understanding why things are different. But that's what I noticed. For me, I guess I was born to not be this super patriotic guy. I never really felt like this hype of it's the best country in the world. For whatever reason, I always thought well, hold on a second. How is it that this country that I was born in and my family was born in, that's number one? Doesn't that seem a little coincidental, right? That 96% of the world are all suckers, that they weren't born in this great panacea. And so it was easy for me because I didn't look through the lens of this is the best, this is the best, this is the best. I think a lot of people do that, and that's why it's hard for them to do what I'm talking about, because they look at everything through the lens of how amazing their country is. But for me, I always felt like it wasn't. And that made it easier for me to go and look at what were the opportunities elsewhere.
Were your parents big travelers? Because, you mentioned your dad gave you kind of the permission slip. Was it kind of a go do what I didn't do, or was it you had an example to follow?
Well, my father is a really smart guy, and he's a very worldly guy, and he's the guy, you'll talk about Timor-Leste or something, and he'll be like, oh, yeah, I was reading about that and their exports and the capital and, this kind of thing. But he hasn't been there, and he's doing a lot more now. We traveled a lot domestically. We did go to Europe several times. We weren't jet setters growing up. Again, very, very Midwestern kind of U.S. family. We're not ostentatious, but we took some trips. But I think that he saw the world was changing. He looked at the idea of, should we move somewhere else? Because he thought, hey, the United States, It's been number one for a while. He believes more in this story than I do, but he said it's been number one for a while, but a lot of the indicators are trending against it going forward. He said that in the 90s, and I think a lot of what he said was correct. And so it was just a matter of, listen, if this place isn't the best place, and I said I think it's going to become less and less, good for people who are successful. Turns out the West has become that, not just the U.S. But he said, why would you be here? Why would you be here if no one respects what you're doing? Right.
Yeah, and talking about what you said, go where you're treated best. I've got kind of my own anecdote, personal story, and I think a lot of people right now dealing with the pandemic are feeling like living in a place like New York City, not exactly the best place to be treated at this moment. And so there's all sorts of data and research showing that there's going to be this kind of grand migration out. But I used to live in Baltimore, Maryland, which is not a place where people like me are treated well. And I lived there because that was my first job out of graduate school. And it was terrible. Really, I couldn't, I was locked down before lockdowns even became a thing because it was just too unsafe to walk around outside. It was too unsafe to do anything. And the moment that I started my business, left my full-time job, kind of became independent of geography and location, I said, I'm getting the hell out of here and moved down to Florida, which was going to be my last pit stop before moving out of the United States. Now, turns out, moved down to Tampa, Florida, had a great time, made a lot of friends, met a wonderful woman who's now my wife, and we have a son together. So I'm locked down here. But that's kind of my domestic story of moving out of somewhere where I was not treated very well. Most people aren't treated very well. But people don't have the balls that you have, Andrew, to just be like, you know what? I'm just going to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, you do need to have some balls. I never thought I was a guy with balls. And then I look at it, and one day, I have a friend who's a coach. And he said, dude, you had one of the world's best passports, and you threw it in a bonfire as a personal statement. So, it does take that. But I think, again, what's interesting to me studying the people that we work with, we started opening up because we built out our team. And so we started serving more than just Americans and Australians and Canadians. And what fascinates me now is you get Serbians, Russians, Ukrainians, who are all very international, and they speak English very well. And so they're certainly a unique breed. But when you talk to those people, they're very eager to do what it takes. They have to move somewhere for lower taxes. Okay, where do I go? They may have some requirements. We want a beach. We want this. We want that. Okay, fine. But when you talk to Westerners, I notice this really distinct thing, because most of my friends these days in my personal life are from Eastern Europe. And there's this really just distinct thing between, they're able to do it. They've seen adversity in their country. And 10 years ago, I hung out with a lot of Chinese people, and I saw that with them too. We've seen adversity. Here's how we react. We don't put too much faith in the government. We do what we're going to do. We do what's best for us. You go to Westerners. I've joked before about like people from Australia. They won't leave because what about our brekkie place? Where are we going to get this avo toast from? Howie's down on the beach. And I mean, everyone gets to make a choice. I mean, what I've said is, California, with the most excruciating tax collection agency in the world, the highest taxes in the United States, and yet 40 million people have made a choice. They've made a choice to live there. Now, many of them are getting money from the government, so that's an easy choice. For everyone who's not getting money, you go there. It's very hard to get ahead. I know guys making $100,000 a year in, suburban Los Angeles driving 1999 Honda Civics. It's hard to get ahead. But yet they've consciously made that choice because they just can't consider that there's another choice. I had a friend recently, after 15 years of telling me he wanted to move to Kansas City, he finally moved to Kansas City. Now he's got a big, beautiful house with a beautiful yard, and that's where he's spending his quarantine, to come back to the point, rather than in some little, house in suburban Los Angeles. So it's tough.
With four roommates, with like 4 or 5 roommates.
Well, in his case, it's with his wife and his 4 kids. And it was 4 boys, and whenever I remember being there, like at his house 10 years ago, and they're running around and punching each other and punching their fists into the wall, and I'm like, oh my god! If I'm gonna have any children, please, like girls. And And so, yeah, I think we're seeing how people are going to be treated in quarantine. It's just another example of how the government works. But to the point, I think people are going to come out of it. They're going to have a short memory. 2 days later, it's going to be, yeah, our government does a great job and they're wonderful and it's fantastic. Because they can't consider something else. I don't know how to force people to look at options, but it's tough.
Yeah. Now, did you start the Nomad Capitalist here in the United States, or did you start it once you moved overseas?
So I was in 2012. I'd been traveling for a number of years, and I bumped it up to the majority of the time. I still had a home in the United States, and I would pop in from time to time. But I was gearing up to be gone full time in early 2013. I closed on my last business that I sold on March 1st, 2013, and that was. I had a 30-day, I had to be around to help the guy. And then on April 1st, off I go. And so what I had started it as a blog to basically blog about my experiences. I'd actually also started an actual radio show that was on a couple of radio stations that friends of mine owned, where I did interviews with folks. And I just thought it'd be a great opportunity to, have a platform like you guys do. When you want to talk to interesting guests, you call them up, you have them on. I would blog about what I was seeing about, apartments in Cambodia. And, maybe I could have a little bit of a persona. And what was interesting from a business point of view is eventually, over the years, people just started coming and saying, hey, I need help with this, I need help with this. It was a great entrepreneurial experiment for a guy who started about 5 different companies, all of which were more planned. This was not planned, and yet it's become the most successful business just by people saying, hey, I need help with something, and then eventually slowly developing a framework to help people, and then building that it is to what it is today, which is a full consultancy working with everyone up to, several billionaires. So it's an interesting business story of how helping people works. But yeah, it was mostly me overseas talking about what I was seeing.
So let's talk about your businesses that you started in the United States and now what you do overseas. What was the radio business, or maybe you sold a couple of businesses? You've mentioned the radio business. What were they? What were the exact, were they shows? Were they networks? What were the business models? And then did you have business ideas before you started traveling and left the United States?
I had the funniest business idea. I remember I had a girlfriend who was from China, and we went to China in 2009, 8 or 9, I forget. But we were in Beijing, and they just started selling, like in Tiananmen Square, they just started selling these panda hats, like these little fur hats with little, cotton balls at the end of them. And I'm like, I was buying these panda hats, and everyone was amazed. Oh, that's amazing. And I said, we should import these panda hats and sell them on an infomercial or in stores or something. And I never did that. And it's turned out for a year or two, the panda hat was kind of a craze, these animal hats. But before that, what facilitated that was, I started a couple different businesses in the radio industry, and they eventually kind of got distilled down into one. Bought out a partner, for example, and kind of put them all together, where we were a market maker for radio infomercials. So if you were, a televangelist, if you were, you talked about natural health, if you talked about finance, if you were a mortgage broker, whatever, we had different, parts of the company where we would basically find opportunities for you to purchase long-form airtime, 30 or 60 minutes of airtime, in some cases 3 hours, even a day, for people who either couldn't get on the air because they're, who wants to put a show about mortgages on the air unless they're getting paid for it, or because they just wanted to fast track the process. I had one client, they had a decent kind of alternative news show, and they just wanted the guy had plenty of money, just wanted to be on the air all over the country. And so we facilitated that from little rinky-dink stations and that we help save, the AM stations, what we'd call closest to the glove compartment, AM 1590, you never even thought it existed. They were about to be unexistent or non-existent because they were going out of business, and we would save them by running some of these shows all the way up to, KABC in Los Angeles. And we would work with these stations. So that was the big thing that facilitated my ability to go out and invest in other things. I helped a friend start a financial services company in the insurance industry. We did that, eventually sold out my share to him that was probably the worst business. It was in the car business a little bit. And then I started, through necessity, a swimming pool cleaning service and repair service in Arizona where I lived. So I couldn't find anyone to clean my swimming pool that would answer the phone. And so my motto for that business was, Mr. Manager that I hired, we're going to answer the phone. And we did very well. We built one of the biggest swimming pool companies in Arizona. in about a year, and I sold it. So those were the businesses.
Now, when did you start doing remote business?
So the first business was radio, and I remember back, I started really getting into it like in '05. I was kind of dabbled in '04, but I really got into it in '05. And I remember sitting, I remember that because it was Hurricane Katrina. People remember the U.S. I got a Vonage phone, and I'm sitting there calling people. Those were the early, people asked, how did I get ahead in the early days? I just called people, right? Maybe that's the balls also. To me, it was just, that's how you get business. You call lots of people. And I thought to myself, I could be doing this anywhere. Because I had actually a radio station I worked with down where you are, Naresh, in Bradenton, Florida, this little radio station.
Yep.
And they're like, maybe you want to come down here sometime and work. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I could take my Vonage phone and work from Bradenton. And then I thought to myself, I could work from an island of the Caribbean somewhere. Like, I don't have to be sitting here. And I did sit there because I guess, there was no nomad capitalist back then telling you how to do it. And so it was like, yeah, that's interesting. I'll get around to it one day. But I realized very early on I could do that. And then I remember, in 2009 going to China, 2010, 2011, and you'd meet people. And in China, they had different phone numbers for cell phones, like a different area code. And I thought to myself, that has to be kind of embarrassing because people know that you're doing business on a cell phone. And then as time went on, I realized, well, who cares? Everyone's doing business on a cell phone now. And so, I think we've all opened up our minds over the years to the fact that you could work from anywhere. I started working from anywhere probably, I guess, '08, '09. I started traveling pretty substantially and taking my laptop with me and doing business and taking orders and all that. So there was not a big push around this back when I was doing it.
Andrew, so we brought up earlier your nickname is the Nomad Capitalist, nomadcapitalist.com. Your home is essentially nomadic. Your work is nomadic. So how do you get your work done without having even a set home?
Well, I think one of the things that I've really been a big proponent of recently is, when you go overseas and you have a successful business, and I've said how over the years more and more people have come and hired us for consulting, and we've been able to charge more and more for that and deliver more and more value. When you have a good income and you legally reduce the tax rate from what you might pay in the U.S., for me it was in the low 40s. For some it's 50, 60%. You have a lot of extra money. And so what I've done is invested part of that money into, buying a couple of homes and decorating a number of homes around the world to where what I found is, for me, productivity is you live in a comfortable environment. When I did three months last year in Latin America with my new wife, we went to a couple different places. Very often felt a little bit uncomfortable staying in some of these Airbnbs, even the nice Airbnbs, even the big ones. There was a kind of a sterility to them in my mind. And so how I get work done is I control my environment, and I have the right teas that I have. I'm a big fan of this company, TWG Teas. I get all their teas in all my different homes, and I have that as a kind of a comfort drink. I decorate the places the way I want. It's kind of my one hobby outside of business is I'm a fledgling interior designer, and I like to do that. And so that's what I've been. It's control your environment. And I think that when you're on the go, that's important. I think back 10 years ago, meeting people who were very successful. There was a guy who ran a $100 million business in the UK, and he had 3 homes. He literally bought the exact same coffee maker for each home, and he would move them around. Like, he would ship them all over the world to these homes to always have the same coffee maker. And I think that's something that really is worth considering. It's controlling your environment no matter where you are.
So I'm looking at the Nomad Capitalist website, and I see you have 12, looks like 12 employees here. Are they all remote as well? And if so, how do you manage them as you're traveling all over the world?
We've got about 20 people now, yeah, so it's really grown. They're not all remote. And this is a thing that people find interesting. Here's my philosophy, right? What we do, being remote, being entrepreneurs, all the stuff we talk about, most people don't understand it. Now, obviously, you don't want to hire people for your business that totally don't understand you, but I also understand that there are people who say, you know what, for me, Serbia is where I'm treated best. And they want to live there because they have a boyfriend or whatever else. And maybe their taxes aren't so high. So we allow people a little bit of flexibility in terms of, we have a guy right now you know what? Why don't I move to KL with you and we've got one other person in KL? But generally, what I'm doing is I'm building out a traditional company where we have office space in different places, and that's where people are. And we do trips, and senior people especially, we're sending them to all the places we talk about. Some of our team leaders this year are going to be going to Dubai, to Lisbon, to Costa Rica. But what I found is not everyone wants to be remote. And as you mentioned, it's tough, right? So if you're hiring new people, they want to be under the wing of someone who knows what they're doing. And so that's what we've done. We find people who want to work. I think the interesting thing is you get to a certain point, even in a remote company, and you have to have some kind of corporate structure. I hate the corporate world. I hate everything about it. But I do remember a guy about 5 years ago, we had a roundtable meeting. The guy had a pretty successful business. He said, if any of you want to build a $100 million company, it ain't going to be sitting in Chiang Mai, Thailand. It ain't going to be in Medellin, Colombia. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I see his point in that, these big companies, they have a presence. They hire Westerners. They're not just hiring, people in wherever. And so I've kind of taken that to heart and added some structure to the business.
Well, talking about Chiang Mai, Thailand, Medellin, Colombia, these are two of the most popular kind of nomad expat destinations. I remember when I was moving out of Baltimore down to Tampa, I was thinking about my next move, and my top two places were Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Medellin, Colombia. So what places do you recommend for people who want to just kind of get out of the United States and work on the fly? And what places do you recommend for the more serious kind of, I guess, corporate business people to expand their businesses?
Well, I don't think there's any right or wrong place. So I don't think moving to Chiang Mai is bad. What I think is potentially an issue is that, people who want to be innovative, someone is innovative, and then a lot of people follow. And so if Chiang Mai, Thailand ticks the boxes for you, then I think by all means you should go there. I like Bali, not to the level of living there, but I can see why people like parts of Bali. If the issue is just, hey, bro, all the other bros are going to Bali, let's go to Bali, then that's not really so innovative. And I think people should make their own decisions. And I think sometimes, again, it's the programming. If you're used to working in a big corporation where everyone, tells you what to do and how to think, and then you want to get into this, it's easy to fall back into the same pattern. So that's all I've said. I mean, I think Kuala Lumpur is one of the great hidden gems of the world in Malaysia. Is the dating scene as vibrant as it is in other places in Asia? Probably not. Alcohol is $1 more expensive for a cocktail. Again, I look at it as if you're making money, who cares? Kuala Lumpur, to me, I lived in Phoenix for about 10 years. It's kind of like the Phoenix of Southeast Asia. You probably don't really want to visit for that long, but if you're going to live somewhere, it's really great. I also have places in Montenegro. I think it's a nice European beach place. Probably not a full-time place. I think Belgrade, Serbia is very underrated. I'm almost hesitant to talk about it. I wanted to kind of stay nice and calm, but that's a great place that's picking up some steam. Tbilisi, Georgia, I've said is a hidden gem. A lot of people have gone to Tbilisi now as a tax-friendly, tourist-friendly place with great food, great wine, nice people. In Colombia, I like Bogota. I like the bigger city. As to what I've seen for people who are doing big business, I think what's nice about Eastern Europe is you have people who are a bit more of your mindset in terms of if you're doing business and you want to hire there. So I think, Kiev and Belgrade, you could build out a business. But, the ultra high net worth people I'm working with, you can go to London and you can do some tax planning. If you've got a lot of money, you can go to Singapore. Those are good places. I think, quite frankly, depending on what you're doing, Mexico City is a great city. So those are places that people are going. And I also think, Dubai. Some of our wealthiest people have been from Dubai. And there's an energy in Dubai for getting work done that I think is great. And what's great is you can bring in workers from all over the world. And so I think Dubai is probably a great place also if you're really trying to do something big. I have some people who are running big businesses, big teams, high-paid teams in places like Dubai.
Now, you went, you took the major step and renounced your citizenship. Two questions here. Number one, what country, if any, are you a citizen of at the moment? And two, you're obviously, you're working with these people in multiple countries. What currency are you taking? Are you taking any of the local currency, or how are you doing business that way?
Yeah, so I've obtained multiple citizenships, and I hope to obtain one or two more this year. I don't talk about them for my own safety, and you never know when some of these countries could clash or when someone could do something. And also, obviously, I have a business interest. I've talked about getting St. Lucian. I've talked about getting the Comoros passports because those are by investment. And since they're easily obtainable for anyone who is in my audience, I've discussed them to help people kind of understand the process. So those are two that I have. We take U.S. dollars in our company. That may be one of the few things that it's still kind of American about me. But, the U.S. dollar is, I think, the accepted world currency, just as English is largely a lingua franca around the world. So we deal in U.S. dollars. I don't really run the finances anymore, but I guess if someone wanted to send us the equivalent in Aussie dollars, we'd figure it out. We've offered that before, I think. Send us euros or whatever, and we'll deal with it. But everything's really based in U.S. dollars, and what I've done personally is taken profits out of the company, and I'll put that in different bank accounts around the world. Including some in foreign currencies, whether it's the Singapore dollar, pretty stable, or something that you wouldn't think is stable but actually has been, like the Armenian dram. But that's on a personal level. As a company, we're basically all in U.S. dollars.
Andrew, how many countries did you visit in 2019?
2019 was a lower year because I've really been trying to build up my team. And they've been doing a lot of traveling. So Ivana Vojnovic, who heads up our research division, went on a couple of 8 or 9 country tours, in 3 weeks. And I'm reliving the halcyon days in my life. But I was probably in 16, 17 countries. Not a lot of them new, because I was doing a lot more deep than wide. But probably about a dozen and a half.
How many countries total do you think you've visited?
Yeah, a little over 100. I mean, like I said, pretty much everywhere in Europe. Pretty much everywhere in Asia, parts of Africa, parts of South America. Again, I try and go places where I see there's a potential opportunity. I've been to France because, early in your life, you go to France, you want to see it. It's kind of like a rite of passage, I guess, for any traveler, But I would not spend much time going to a place like France today. And there are examples of, France all around the world, right? I'm looking for opportunities. I'm looking for something unique. And to speak to your point about, the Chiang Mai's and the Medellins, I'm probably a bit too much of a contrarian. If other people are doing it, I figure, hey, that's already been covered. Let me figure out something new. So I'm always looking for new places. What's really on my radar right now is Central Asia. I think it's becoming a bit of a tourism hub. Also in South Asia, I think Sri Lanka will become a big place to go, kind of like Iceland was. But I'm not sure that there are so many opportunities there yet. But Central Asia, to me, is a very interesting region for tourism, and I think it's going to open up. So that's the kind of place that I'm looking to go to.
A lot of our people, if they're looking at starting a business, they're thinking, I have to use my current network, deal with the relationships I have here, and build out the business that way. How have you gone about building relationships and gaining business in multiple countries?
Well, one thing I've done, I do a lot of, immigration procedures. I've tried out different residences. I help people do that. So I do real estate deals. So I've built relationships with lawyers in a lot of countries. A lot of times a lawyer is a good person as a jumping off point. If you've got a good internationally minded lawyer, they know people in the country. They know other international people in the country, expats, for example. And so, they can be a good person to meet. And so I've become friends with a number of these lawyers, and they've introduced me to other folks. That's been good for building the network, because then you meet the real estate agents, you meet, good people. Here's my philosophy on this, though. You have to do. I think sometimes people focus on, needing everything to be perfect. I have some folks that I work with occasionally where they really need everything explained in perfect detail, and I say, listen, guys, until you go out and just absorb yourself in some of this, it's not going to make 100% sense. Doing, to me, is what is the big equilibrium. And so most people don't do that. And so for me, the network is, how do I get things done in these foreign countries? In terms of growing my business, I rely on building my team. And I have a team that has great intuition. They get the vision. They get what we're trying to accomplish. And I really look inward. People always talk about, let's do a YouTube collaboration. I find it's easier just for me to double down and create more great content myself rather than relying on other people. So I think I'm a very self-reliant person. I think that's my philosophy in life. But obviously you want a good network, and that's why I would build it overseas.
You mentioned the tax, I guess. You sold a couple of businesses and you paid all these taxes. So you're basically punished for succeeding. And what are the tax advantages for expats? Like, why should they leave the United States, and how much can they actually save?
Well, obviously there's many different possible scenarios, right? I mean, some people, for example, they can move their entire business overseas, but I've seen an increasing number of people in recent, let's say the last year, where they have 5 people sitting in Austin, Texas, for example, or in Tampa, Florida, and they don't want to move those people, and so that their plan becomes a bit more difficult. So obviously there's different plans, but if you're an American, you would move because you can generally pay somewhere in the single digits or low double digits in tax, rather than what you might be at 40, 50% otherwise. If you're not an American, you can pay potentially as little as 0, depending on how your company is set up and what's involved, where you choose to live, etc. So I mean, paying anywhere from 0 to 12, 13%. If you live in Montenegro and you're paying 9%, then that may not be that appealing unless again you're making millions and you move to Dubai. But if you're a Westerner, most everyone I'm talking to, they're paying 40 to 60%. And so being able to cut that down by 80 or 90% is substantial. And so I talk about 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs. I work with some folks who make 500 grand, that kind of thing. And there's some really good guys in there. But obviously the bigger the number, the bigger the potential is, right? And it begins to become really serious to where, I was talking to a guy just last night. He wants to buy a house in his hometown, and 1 year of tax savings, you can just go write a check for the house.
Wow. Yeah. So are you telling me, like, I run my business, I have 2 different businesses. One of them is a real estate, kind of a single family real estate investment business. The other one is my bread and butter, Christian media and marketing. So if I were to move to one of these tax-friendly locations, like you said, Serbia, for example, and I can live wherever I want in the world. And so let's assume that I'm continuing to make the same amount of money. You're telling me that the amount in tax that I currently pay is about 40 to 50%, but it would all of a sudden I'd be saving at least 30% on my taxes.
Well, yeah, 30% lower rate. Yeah, I mean,
yes.
So you'd probably be down in the teens. Now, what I would tell you is I made up something called what I call the tax-friendly quadrant. And that is there's you, and then there's your business. That's on one side. And then the other side is where you're leaving and where you're arriving. So Serbia may be a good place for you to live personally, and that may be pretty tax-friendly on a personal level. I think what people get sometimes confused is I talk about Georgia a lot, and I have in the past years. And they say, I'm going to start my business in Georgia. Well, I never really said incorporate in Georgia. I mean, if you want to go and start a local business on the ground, there's a lot of opportunities. Of course, you're going to have to incorporate in Georgia. The business is on the ground. But if you're just starting an international business, I would probably choose a place like Georgia, Serbia, or dozens of other places you could live and incorporate somewhere else. And this is where it comes down to what we call planting flags. Your business is one place, you're living in another place or places. Both are tax friendly, but one is tax friendly to your business, one is tax friendly to you personally, and then they both need to work out. So if you can figure out that puzzle. Oh, and then by the way, you need to leave where you're at. So you can't just continue to spend 10 months a year living in the United States while your company is in Belize, for example, and then not pay. That's another misconception, right? I can just put my company in the British Virgin Islands and there's no tax there. Yes, but there's tax for you as residents, right? And there's a thing called controlled foreign corporation rules, permanent establishment, mind-in management, many rules that say if you run a BVI or a Belize company from US, Canada, whatever, they're just going to tax it like it were a local company. But if you figure out that puzzle, yeah, I mean, you could be paying anywhere from 0. You're an American, so you're not going to be paying 0 really anymore. But, I mean, you could be paying maybe 10%. And then, how much time you want to spend in the United States is going to dictate where else you should be. And, do you need a home somewhere else, or are you going to be nomadic? I mean, there's lots of questions to answer, but the bottom line is I'm generally telling people how to pay 10% or less.
Nice. Now, what countries have you found are the most business-friendly for starting your own business?
What my focus is for people who are running businesses like, we said creation, marketing, and media, which it's in the cloud, basically. It's digital. Onshore is the new offshore. So the Belize, the Seychelles, all those kind of traditional offshore companies, the Marshall Islands, not very well respected anymore. You're going to have a hard time getting a bank account, a hard time actually doing business with them, getting your money out, whatever. I'm looking at onshore places where they're more, low tax. So, there's many that really it's dictated by what you're doing, the UAE, Hong Kong, sometimes even the US, the UK. There's a lot of different countries that are good. Countries that are business friendly for new businesses, I think Georgia has been one of the best. President Mikhail Saakashvili, who's speaking at we've got a conference coming up later this year. He's been nice enough to come. He was the guy who reformed Georgia. He made it number 6 in the list of easiest places to do business. It's so easy to set up a company. Taxes are easy. Everything's easy. So for me, if I'm looking as a young entrepreneur, if I don't already have a business, and I'm looking for a place with wide open opportunity, I don't want to stay in the United States or in a Western country where everything and every idea has been done to death, and I'm going to be wading into a shark tank of competition. I'm going to go to a place like Georgia where in my 7 years, I think, of being there, I have found a good English-speaking realtor. One, I have 2 good real estate agents. One doesn't speak English. So if I'm going to start a business, I'm going to go to Georgia where it's easy to incorporate a company, services are affordable, everything's extremely transparent, there's almost no corruption, it's cheap, it's easy to handle everything. Oh, and by the way, it's my pool idea all over again. Answer the phone. If you can be a real estate agent or have a fleet of real estate agents and you cannot be 30 minutes late for appointments and show up with a hole in your jeans, you are in business.
Wow. So, Andrew, one of the things that working from home, first off, this is a trend that is only going to continue to pick up as more and more companies start going digital and really have been forced to go digital because of the global pandemic. They're realizing that this whole idea of remote working, digital working, it's the future. I've been doing it for more than a decade now, for probably 12, 13 years, similar to you. And staying on the topic of working from home, one of the issues is, especially as a single guy or girl, you're at home. You're kind of locked down at home, and it's kind of difficult to meet people no matter what country you're in. You said earlier in the episode that you found that it was easier to date outside of the United States. Mm. What did you mean by that? What are the differences that you're seeing in the dating culture worldwide?
When I was in the United States, I was this very kind of pedantic kid because at 19 I was trying to start a business. Now, today, hashtag entrepreneur, everyone's an entrepreneur, or at least trying to be, and so it's a little bit different. But, I remember my friends, the few young friends I had at the time, they would occasionally drag me to a bar somewhere. I didn't drink back then. And I would go there like after a long day of, dressing up to sit at home and work. So I felt like, that's the key to being, to getting more output is, let me feel good, being dressed up. And I would go out and girls would be like, why are you wearing like cufflinks? Like, what is that? And, and I remember like I started wearing scarves later, like, it'd be a little chilly. I'd wear a scarf. And like grown women would come to me in the street and being like, what are you, gay? Like just out of nowhere, like on the sidewalk. Like, what are you gay? And so, I married a woman who grew up in Moscow. She's Russian, Armenian, and I know a lot of people from that part of the world. I've spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe over the last 5-6 years, and she's like, we don't have this at all. She's like, to me, what you've done, you started a business from nothing, not just one, but multiple businesses from nothing. You moved all over. You did what you wanted, right? You lived exactly the life that you wanted. You didn't let anyone else bring you down. You took that action. She said, that's really manly to us. And yet if you go to the United States, what is manly, right? I don't go to the gym that often. I'm not like an obese guy, but, I'm not a muscular guy. He's not manly. Or these guys who are all like angry how, they can't get a date. Oh, he got married. He's a pussy. And it's like, excuse me, I built a great business empire over the years. I've done whatever I wanted to. I mean, and so in other countries, they recognize, that's manly, and they like that, and that works. I remember the first time, actually, I was in Norway. I met a girl who was living in Ireland, but she was from Asia, and we had it was the first time I just had this great conversation where it's like, oh, you're a little witty, you're not, you have a sense of humor, you have this, you have that, and I don't know exactly what it is. I think that for some people, it's just not a fit. And to me, I mean, the Western dating culture, it seems very, very weird. When I go back and look at, all my time trying to date people in the United States, it's very weird to me. There's just a lot of, a lot of weirdness from, why are you wearing a scarf? I mean, to me, that sums it all up.
Yeah. Well, what are your tips though? So we've got listeners, people who are taking this episode, because this is a very different episode from all of our previous episodes. This is, I think, very eye-opening. And these are the questions our listeners are going to have in their minds. Well, okay, well, if I move to Chiang Mai, well, are there, women who are interested in Americans there? How do you date? Are people Tindering? Are they using OkCupid or Match, or are they just going out to the beach and meeting each other? Kind of, what's the vibe? What are your tips?
Well, I think a lot of people are Tindering. I think, with Tinder Premium or Tinder Plus, whatever it's called. And I heard right now during this whole time, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that it's free. Someone had told me they were encouraging all their single friends to get on there. And so, I think everyone has their own different place. If you're 22 years old, you're probably not going to go to a place like Ukraine because they're not going to take you very seriously. They're going to be like, you're just a boy who wants to play around. There's other places where you would be accepted. I mean, so I think that, number one, Western Europe to me is more open. I remember we had one of our conferences previously in Cancun, and at the end we ran into these girls at the bar, my two camera guys and a good friend of mine who was emceeing the event, and I. And the friend of mine, he got married pretty young, and he said, what's going on? Like, this is incredible. Like, these girls from Germany are just like talking, and they're like open, and they're like encouraging their friends to go be with that guy, kind of thing. He's like, in the United States, it would be like someone would be like throwing a hissy fit to stop their friend from getting lucky, right? And so I think Western Europe, it's more open and honest. Western Europe, not great for tax, not great for a lot of things, but people there that I've found, it's like a real, like, hey, we're all in this together. To the point where I had some friends a couple of years ago where the guy said, hey, here's your half the money for the ring, go buy something you want. Because it's like, it really is equal. The other place is, if you go to a place like Jakarta, Indonesia, not a lot of people go there. Right. And so you want to, you don't want to find, people who are super jaded. That was one thing that as I matured, it's just like, I just want to find people who are nice and just want to be open-minded. And, you go to some of these places where they've been overrun with tourists. People just get jaded. You're all the same. And I always felt like, for me, I didn't have that many relationships. I did a lot of casual dating up until I got married. But I was always looking for, some kind of respectable, thing. It wasn't like I want to be one of these guys from the blog where it's like I slept with 90 Filipinos in a month. And yet I think that in some pockets, like, all right, that's every guy. That's people think that's every guy. So, that's another reason why I say, go off the beaten track, and find people who are more open to that. Again, people in Indonesia, very nice people. I live in Malaysia, some of the nicest people ever. The problem is Malaysia's a bit more wealthier, and so some of the people, I think that deep down they're very nice. They try and adopt some of these snarky mannerisms sometimes because, like, it's the cool thing to do when you have money, I think besides that, defining what your objective is. For me, I never wanted to be a guy who was going out and doing, again, that seemed a little bit advantageous to me, to do that. But, Colombia, I think, is a very nice place, very open people, very warm people. I think really anywhere you go. To me, the United States is this really weird bubble, and the Western world outside of Western Europe. I mean, like Australia, Canada, UK. It's just really weird. And you can go to Russia, Colombia, Ukraine. You can go to Indonesia. And by the way, as I said, we met people from Germany and other Norway, other Western countries. Those women are hard up for a husband. My wife is a doctor, and she's not like, sitting on the street somewhere. So you can find people who are very sophisticated, who probably know a lot more about history, a lot more about fine art, a lot more about, interesting things, if you'd like, than you're going to find, with some girl in Tempe, Arizona.
Yeah. No, you're
Nomad raw. Never been. This is really raw.
Yeah. Tempe, Arizona. That's the home of Arizona State University, and I've never been there, but I've seen the college parties, the videos, and all that good stuff. But look, Andrew, like I said, Adam and I, like we don't know probably anybody who has the world experience that you have. And I know these are the questions that our listeners are thinking in the back of their mind, like, oh, I hope he asks this question. I hope he talks about this topic. Because it's just so important if you're going to make a life decision to leave the United States and travel around the world for a finite amount of time or permanently.
Let me just add this, if I made it your last point, to end on go where you're treated best. Because when I talk to my wife and she looks at all of her friends. All of her friends came down for our wedding in Montenegro last summer. They're still posting pictures of it all these months later, and their exposure to, meeting different people was very interesting for them because, in Russia, it really is a matter of go where you're treated best. You have very well-educated women who are often more educated than the men. They're more hardworking than the men, but they just don't have the men there who are really doing what you and I are talking about, starting businesses. It's tough, right? And so, for them, we'd like to find someone. Not even it's about success or money or all that. Just someone who has something interesting, who is ambitious. It's the definition of manly that I gave you. And so if you go there, you will find people. That, you don't have to be a millionaire. It's not a. For some people it's a gold digger thing for sure. But you can find people who aren't, and you can go where you're treated best, where people actually want to date you. Imagine that. Where we come from, there's a big thing where it's like you feel like it's a war, and it's like you've got to prove yourself and you've got to be miserable. And I have to say, go where you're treated best. And this is you'll probably see some women that would say to this like, oh, well, you're just looking for the easy way out, as if like life is supposed to be miserable. As if finding people and places with whom you are a good fit, is terrible. Listen, that's the whole point of this lifestyle, Naresh, is people are not going to like you doing this. People are going to feel jealous and angry that you're no longer paying 50% in tax so their 7 kids can go to college for free when Bernie Sanders gets in, right? They're going to be jealous that you are dating, a better looking or married to a better looking, woman. Then what's good. So no one's going to really understand or like this lifestyle necessarily, but it is about going where you're treated best. Yeah.
Well, Andrew Henderson, man, it's been an awesome interview. Always a pleasure talking to you because, kind of the selfish part of me, or not selfish, but the vicarious part of me is like, man, what if I did move out of Tampa after that 1 year and pursue this lifestyle? Like, what would have happened? What would it have been like? And every time I talk to you, I start thinking about it because you're actually living it. So your website, nomadcapitalist.com, you are the Nomad Capitalist. So founder and CEO of the Nomad Capitalist, nomadcapitalist.com once again. Andrew Henderson, any final thoughts, comments, pitches you want to make?
Well, I would say that if people want to learn more about this in detail on an entry-level way, I wrote a book, you can find it on Amazon, called Nomad Capitalist, where I spell out kind of the 3 different categories you can do this. Because, by the way, you don't have to leave the United States. You can open a foreign bank account and hold different currencies. You can invest in boom markets without leaving your country. You can do a lot of things. So I would recommend the book. But my biggest thing is, for me, what I'm always pushing against is you have to be willing to break down the barriers. That's a hard thing. For me, as an entrepreneur, it's all about doing. It's almost, as one of my recent clients said, it's almost, he has the same thing, it's almost impulsive. You just want to always be doing. And to be doing in this area, you have to realize that your country is probably not number one in anything, let alone everything. And if you can absorb that, not just as a cliche on a pillow, but as a reality, and you can absorb that into your body, then you can start making decisions about some of this stuff from the perspective of, where are the best opportunities? Where can I go where I'm treated best? And then you can start doing and get this stuff done. And I think you'll have a lot better quality of life. You'll get wealthy faster. But it comes with breaking down those barriers that were built into your mind when you were a kid, that this is the only place.
Yeah, well, thanks for once again coming on the Work From Home show. You are working from Kuala Lumpur right now, but really, whenever I talk to you, you could be working from anywhere. And to all our listeners out there, visit our website, www.workfromhomeshow.com. Get on our mailing list there. Check out all our previous episodes. Leave us a review on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify. We're everywhere. We want to thank all of you guys for continuing to listen to our show. Andrew might be working from anywhere, but until next time, to all our listeners, keep on working from home.